You ever feel that deep restlessness? That pull towards somewhere else, a search for something you can't even put a name to? Well, today, we're diving into the figure who is the absolute embodiment of that feeling, the wanderer. And we're going to see how modern cognitive science might, just might, give us a totally new way to understand this ancient, wandering soul.
So get this verse comes from a poem that's over 1,000 years old. It just perfectly nails the mood, doesn't it? This lonely figure, an exile, totally adrift in a harsh world. And what's wild is that this isn't just some character from a forgotten poem, it's a feeling we all instantly recognize, even a millennium later. So who is this wanderer, really? This solitary person who just seems to drift through our culture, a stranger in every land, always looking for a place to finally feel at home. It's such a powerful idea, but what's actually going on there?
And once you start listening for it, the echo of the wanderer is, well, it's everywhere. You hear it in the sad, beautiful notes of Schubert's music and in the deep yearning of American folk songs like Poor Wayfaring Stranger. You see it in the story of the prodigal son, the one who leaves it all behind for that far country. And yeah, modern psychology has a name for it too, a state of profound loneliness in this restless search for meaning. It doesn't matter the century or the medium, the wanderer is always there, walking that same lonely road.
Okay, but what if this isn't just about poetry or psychology? What if the wanderer's whole experience is actually rooted in a very distinct way of thinking? This right here is where our investigation really kicks off, with a fascinating concept from cognitive science called monotropism.
Monotropism basically describes a mind that runs on an interest system. So imagine your attention isn't like a big, broad floodlight lighting up the whole room. Instead, it's like a powerful focused laser beam, an attention tunnel, that just illuminates one thing with an almost blinding intensity.
And look, this isn't some abstract theory. It is a deeply, deeply felt experience. Just listen to how this person describes the power of that attention tunnel. It's a state of complete and total absorption, where an interest isn't just a casual hobby, it's a source of this intense, sometimes overwhelming joy.
But, there's a flip side to that incredible focus. When you're deep inside that tunnel, the rest of the world can just fade away. It might not even register at all. So when something unexpected happens, a sudden change, an interruption, it's not just a minor annoyance. It can feel like a bomb going off, a catastrophic break from a safe, focused state. Starting to sound a bit like our isolated wanderer, right?
So what's the engine driving all this? How does a monotropic mind actually process information? Well, it seems to come down to a really fundamental difference in learning styles, almost like two totally different kinds of filing systems in your brain.
Let's break this down. The more common style, which we'll call interpolation or INT, is kind of like learning the general rules of grammar. It's flexible, it's good at adapting. The monotropic preference, on the other hand, is more like what's called a lookup table, or LUT. It doesn't really generalize. Instead, it meticulously stores thousands of specific, concrete examples. Think of it like this. An INT style learns the general rule, be polite. An LUT style, though, stores hundreds of very specific examples. In this situation, you shake hands. In that situation, you don't interrupt. With this person, you use this exact phrase. It builds this massive internal library, which makes it incredibly powerful in systems where the patterns are predictable. Think chess, music, or computer code.
So how does this lookup table system actually lead to mastery? It's this really cool three-step process. First, it just soaks up and stores countless precise patterns and examples. Then, it starts chunking them together, grouping them into meaningful wholes. And finally, after absorbing enough of these patterns, the logic of the entire system just becomes second nature. It's not memorization anymore. It's a deep, intuitive understanding that's born from this huge library of examples.
To really get a feel for the power of perceiving the world differently, let's turn to a story you might not expect. The story of Amar Bose and his quest for the perfect sound.
So back in the 60s, Amar Bose was a music lover and an MIT professor, and he had a big problem. He'd go to Boston Symphony Hall and get completely swept away by this rich, immersive sound. Then he'd go home, put on a record with the fanciest, most expensive gear you could buy, and it just felt flat, lifeless. He knew something huge was missing between the live experience and the recording. So being an MIT guy, he measured it, and what he found was a complete game changer. Look at this graph. You see that steep drop on the left? That's the sound coming directly from the instruments. It basically disappears almost instantly. The rest of it, that big long flat line, is all reverberant sound.
It's the sound that has bounced off the walls, the ceiling, the floor. And that was the aha moment. We aren't just hearing the orchestra, we're hearing the room.
And that one insight changed everything. Just listen to his chief engineer here. He says the goal wasn't to create a speaker that just perfectly reproduced sound waves. No, the goal was to reproduce the experience. They used speakers to turn the listening room itself into a concert hall. Amar Bose literally heard the world differently, and it led to a revolution. He realized the problem wasn't the sound, it was how everyone else was listening.
So, how does this all tie together? What's the big revelation? We've met the archetype, we've explored the cognitive science, and we've heard the Bose story. Now, let's bring it all back home to our wanderer.
This line from The Prodigal Son, it's usually seen as a story about forgiveness. But if we look at it through this new lens, it's not just about repentance. It's a story of return. It's this joyful celebration for someone who was lost and is now found. It's not about fixing a flaw, it's about welcoming back something precious that everyone thought was gone for good.
And here it is. This is the core revelation. The wanderer's intense focus, that deep restlessness, the constant feeling of being an outsider. What if these aren't character flaws or deficits? What if they are the natural hallmarks of a monotropic, LUT-based mind trying to navigate a world that was built for a completely different cognitive style? The far country isn't a place of sin. It's a world that just doesn't match your brain's operating system.
T.S. Eliot just nails the feeling of this return perfectly. The journey isn't about changing who you are just to fit in. It's about coming home to yourself. It's about finally understanding your own unique cognitive architecture and, maybe for the very first time, seeing clearly the kind of place where you can actually thrive.
Which brings us to one last, really crucial question. If the wanderer isn't truly lost, just operating differently, is the goal for them to change? Or is it on the rest of us to recognize this and to start building environments, workplaces, communities, relationships that are more welcoming to all different ways of thinking, so that every kind of mind can finally find its way home?